Nvidia mentioned during their most recent earnings that they are supply constrained. But what does that mean exactly? I'll cover that in today's episode. I'll also take a closer look at some recent updates impacting the supply chain that Nvidia investors are not going to want to miss. But before we get started, make sure to hit the thumbs up, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and check out the pinned comment for special offer at fool.com/Jose and 50% off my Q3 semiconductor earnings ebook. And you also get Q2 earnings ebook for free. 50% coupon is down on the pinned comment. Now, let's get started.
I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for the subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
All right, so we can see Nvidia stock was down roughly 3% on Friday after reporting earnings. If you are curious about my earnings thoughts, I did 2 episodes about that late this past week. And too long, don't watch. I am a big Nvidia shareholder, been here for a while, and nothing here gave me any reasons to sell. I'm still very long-term bullish on this company. Now, before we go into the main topic, 2 things I want to showcase is there are 2 big events, financial events coming out for Nvidia. The first one is going to be December 3rd, which is going to be US Global Technology and AI Conference. We'll just hear maybe a little bit new updates about the AI space, and we're going to probably get more Q&A sessions. So I think that's going to be very, very important for Nvidia investors. I might either do a live stream on it or just do an episode covering it. So make sure to let me know in the comments below what you want. Now, the second one, I think it's a very big deal. Nvidia is an important player in the healthcare market, and I don't think many put this in their bullish thesis. I think the healthcare space is going to be a huge, huge multi-billion opportunity for Nvidia in forms of revenue. And on January 13th, they're going to have the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference, where they're pretty much going to discuss their overall healthcare solution. Now, same time this year, January 13th of 2024, so about 10, 11 months ago, I did the exact same video covering that conference. So if you want to learn about Nvidia's healthcare solution, I think just put Nvidia Healthcare and Jose Najarro, and you'll be able to understand how Nvidia can grow in this space. But as a big Nvidia bull, I think robotics is pretty interesting. Obviously, AI is pretty interesting. I also think healthcare is going to be a major play for them. So just wanted to bring that up to you, Nvidia investors. Now, I want to discuss this kind of thing that we saw during the earnings transcript. So Nvidia mentioned while demand greatly exceeded supply, they are on track to exceed their previous Blackwell revenue estimates of several $billion as their visibility into supply continues to increase. So if you're an Nvidia investor, there's 2 things you want to hear from that. That's actually very bullish. The first thing is supply visibility is increasing. That means that TSMC is able to make more chips for Nvidia than previously anticipated. The second thing that we saw here is they are going to expect to make more revenue in Blackwell than previously expected. I also think that's pretty bullish. So the 2 things, Blackwell is going to sell more in Q4 than expected. And number 2 that you can read between the lines is supply chain is getting better for Nvidia. And we can see in this kind of chart right here that Nvidia, it's not that we talked about it. Nvidia is supply constrained. And because they are supply constrained, they can only sell as many chips as TSMC can make. And you can see from Q4, they sold about 18 billion in data center. Q1 of fiscal year of 2025, they sold 22. The following one was 26 and now was around 30 billion. So it seems like their TSMC on average is able to increase revenue capacity or supply chain capacity by about $4 billion, right? That's what we're getting, right? We saw a $4 billion increase here. We saw a $4 billion increase here, and here as well. So again, this is not because Nvidia is selling more chips because the demand is increasing. This is because the supply is increasing, and supply, you can't just increase it infinitely all the time. So I actually kind of brought this scenario. So a little bit more explanation of what is supply constraint. So let's say the demand for chips is over 200, right? But only 100 chips can be made. And this is also going to be a scenario where I kind of discuss why Nvidia is going to dominate, but why other AI players can dominate as well. So let's say that demand for chips is over 200. only 100 chips can be made. And let's just break it down. These are no real representation of what's happening right now, but assume 90 is made by Nvidia and only 10 are, obviously TSMC is making them, only 90 are sent to Nvidia and 10 are sent to AMD. So those are your 100 chips that TSMC can make. No matter how much demand there is, the demand can be infinite. Nvidia, at the end of the day, can only sell 90 chips, which limits Nvidia from even more growth and the ability to completely destroy earnings, right? Nvidia revenues in all these quarters could have been much higher because the demand is there. Unfortunately, the supply is not there from TSMC, so its growth is capped. It's limited. And I do believe this is also what's kind of helping ease some of the expectations. So no matter how much demand there is, NVIDIA can only sell 90 chips, right? And I think now NVIDIA can no longer destroy earnings expectations because now analysts and Wall Street are getting better at really understanding the supply chain. So they can make smarter projection by estimating the ceiling, and that's why revenue beats are shrinking over time. Right, so if we kind of look back at those numbers here, we can see NVIDIA made about $35 billion in revenue this year. On average, capacity is only growing about $4 billion a quarter. So it's kind of safe to assume that NVIDIA's revenue for quarter four, if that supply chain trend line continues, is going to be around $39 billion, right? It's not going to be anywhere about 45. It's not going to be some crazy number. It's to be expected now that it's going to grow around that $4 billion run rate. Now, we do have some great news, right? We've seen recent reports that NVIDIA secures 60% of TSMC's double CoWoS capacity for 2025. So a quick kind of rewind here. The reason TSMC can't manufacture enough chips is not because of their manufacturing line, their main manufacturing line that uses equipment from ASML. Manufacturing comes in two stages. It comes from front-end packaging and back-end packaging. Front-end manufacturing is using tools like that ASML provides, which is like the EUV machines. That's not where the bottleneck is. And that is why, and even though there's a huge demand for AI chips, no one is out there buying tons and tons of ASML machines because that's not where the bottleneck is. The bottleneck is in the second part, which is the back-end manufacturing, also known as advanced packaging. One form of advanced packaging is this right here called CoWoS. So TSMC is actually working on increasing this CoWoS capacity dramatically. I think they doubled it in 2024. Now they're expected to double it again in 2025. Now, there are reports that NVIDIA secures 60% of TSMC's double CoWoS capacity. So of whatever they're adding, NVIDIA is reportedly getting 60% of that new addition. So that's very, very bullish for NVIDIA, right? Because at the end of the day, there's not just two players in the AI chip market that are using CoWoS. You have NVIDIA, right, which is the dominant player. But then you have companies like AMD. But it's not just AMD. You have Intel. You might also have companies like all these big tech players that are creating their own ASIC solution. We know Microsoft builds their own AI chip. Amazon builds their own AI chips. Google builds their own AI chips. Then you also have startup companies building their own AI chips, right? There's companies like Cerebras. I don't know if Cerebras uses CoWoS, but regardless, NVIDIA is expected to get 60% of this double capacity, while the other 40% is fought against every other player out there. So in my opinion, this is very bullish at the overall growth potential for NVIDIA. But like I mentioned, Wall Street is getting better at really understanding the supply chain so they can make smarter projections by estimating the ceiling, and that's why revenue beats are shrinking. We can see earlier this year, revenue was beating by almost 8%. Now revenue expectations are only being beaten by 4%, 5%, even 6%. So it's getting smaller and smaller, but that's because Wall Street is getting better at understanding what the ceiling is. So they're making better guesses. So if you can only make 100 chips, but the demand is over 200, NVIDIA is always going to sell those 90 chips, especially because of the current AI space right now. The market of AI right now is evolving at rapid pace, so you don't have the luxury to wait. There might be a market where you might have high demand and you might not have enough supply. And sometimes people are willing to wait. You know what? Let me wait a few more quarters before I make any heavy purchases or before I continue to buy. But not in this market of AI. This space is evolving at such a rapid level that you don't have the luxuries to wait. So no matter what, because evolutions of AI is so high and the desire to keep innovating and keep beating everyone, all 100 chips will be sold either by the number one and even number two players. So that's why I think even if AMD makes way worse chips than Nvidia, because of the current market, because of the current supply chain market, because of the current AI dynamics, Nvidia will be able to sell those 90 chips that I made in this fake example, and AMD will be able to sell those 10 chips. Now, like I mentioned and we saw earlier, now the great thing about TSMC, it's building capacity. And that is the main reason why Nvidia has shown data growth over time. But that is also why other players can win. So we kind of talked about this extra capacity. Let's say it's doubling, right? So let's say TSMC adds an extra 100 chips of capacity. But this time it only gives 60 chips to Nvidia because at the end of the day, right, TSMC has great partners with everyone. They can't really pick one favorite. If they give all 90 to Nvidia again and then only 10 to everybody else is going to complain. And they need, TSMC needs those other partners as well. So it has to make sure to keep those partnerships alive. So it's going to give 60 to Nvidia. Let's say it gives 30 to those other ASIC players that I mentioned, Marvell, Qualcomm, Google, Microsoft, and everybody else developing AI chips. And then it gives 10 to AMD. Now, this is why I believe AMD can also benefit. So let's see AMD's AI chip sales went from 10 to 20. That's a 100% growth in revenue. And this is where I believe AMD is gonna potentially be a great stock in the long term. While Nvidia's growth went from 90 chips to 150 chips, so they have way more chips than AMD, that's only a 66% growth. The great thing is they're still taking nearly all of the market share in the AI space. But the other AI companies are also going to be growing in this space. And because they're starting at a small base, even if they only get another small base of capacity, that percentage point can actually be a lot higher. And that's why I believe the current AI market is making it worthwhile to even invest in the second player, even on the third player, even in the fourth player, because this is what we're expecting to see at least for the next year or so. So again, I just want to kind of explain a little bit more about the supply constraint market, kind of explain the great news for Nvidia about how there are reports that they are securing a lot of CoWoS capacity from TSMC. And also I wanted to explain why AMD and other players can benefit in this space. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you want to learn more about the semiconductor space, make sure to use that coupon code for 50% off on my earnings ebook. Take care, have a good day, and see you next time.